Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for being here as always. Today we've got a pretty awesome show. Well, we always have an awesome show, but specifically today we've got Lucas from Vent Finance, the co-founder over there, and we're going to be talking about all sorts of stuff, what the project is all about. We're going to talk about sort of the tech side of things, maybe related to Cardano, so on and so forth. So Lucas, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure to be able to share a bit of our story today.
Absolutely. I think the best place to start for everybody is just to give a little bit about your background so folks can get to know you a little bit and how you got into the space.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my name's Lucas. I'm one of the co-founders at Vent. I've been in this space for about 2 years. Very recently, I joined like full time to blockchain in general, and this was pretty much March of this year when we started into building Vent. Prior to that, I spent 2.5 years in consulting, mostly working on tech projects and kind of understanding what are the big challenges in the market and building solutions that kind of fit customer needs. And prior to that, I had obviously experience within technology, more operationally, which is what my role at Vent was mainly consisting of until now. What that kind of means is we come to a team with a lot of strong understanding of how to build technology and how to get technology out there for the users. But at the same time, a huge challenge, which is, this is, kind of new territory for everyone. A lot of tools don't exist. And at the same time, customers are very demanding, right? And when I say customers, we call it community here in the space. Is, this isn't a traditional, buy, sell market like you would find in the tech space, but we're actually building things together. And I think that that's the biggest challenge or approach change that we had to take is, this is something new. We need to be open to listening to the community, and we need to build something that's really technologically advanced or that resolves a very key issue. And so that's what my background is and kind of how we approach building anything in this space.
Well, I think that's a fantastic segue to, to what you're building and the problems that you're trying to solve. So if you could, for folks that, maybe don't have a background on what Vent is all about, could you give sort of the elevator pitch of what the company is, what you're building, and the problem you're solving?
Absolutely. So we're a CDeFi platform within the Cardano and Polygon space. And mainly the key proposition that we have is we connect tokenized projects or startups with the resources that they need. And typically those resources have to do with funds. This process of finding funds is typically what you do in a launchpad to give exposure and to build. And then the second aspect is obviously these projects actually need to build their things, right? And they need to connect to the right resources. And so our job goes way beyond just finding the funds. It goes actually connecting them to the right providers, to the right partners, whether that's marketing exposure or technical development or bridging against different chains. This is what we see day in and day out. And so we have a team that works with projects, finds these best promising projects in the space, and then accompanies them through their journey in the Cardano space in this case.
Awesome. So you don't necessarily have to mention specific projects that might be in the pipeline or whatever. I think what I would be really curious about is like what are some of those areas on the tech side? Because I think a lot of people are comfortable with the idea of a launchpad, right? Getting the word out there on a vetted project. But all these projects have tech challenges. So like, what are some of the tech things that you're seeing that projects are commonly rubbing up against as they go to launch?
So I'd say consistently, the issue is with regards to what the company does. So I'll give you a very good example right now. Like 70% of projects out there are games, the ones that have a lot of traction. And so games are really interesting because if you look at the profile of these people, they don't have a financial background necessarily. They're really good at OpenGL or understanding how to build a game and the gaming economics. But there's ultimately a big objective, which is we are entering a financial market. You are taking a company somewhat public. And so there's a lot of things that are entailed or connected to that, whether that be liquidity and how you manage that and how that liquidity and all these financial concepts are reflected in your technology. And that's where a lot of the issues are, is that a lot of these projects just outsource the development because they don't have teams. And so the quality of those contracts and I would say the integrity of them are very kind of the foundations are not great. And that's consistently what happens. It doesn't matter what the language is, whether it's, Solidity or Haskell, that's every single time the same issue. And so I think that's why auditors play a really big role, is that this phase of understanding your business logic and then reflecting that into your code is really hard. And it's hard to master for, gaming projects, but it's hard to master for us as a DeFi project as well. And so I think that's why that's something that needs to be addressed. We still don't have a solution to it. But I think it's kind of the fundamentals of it, because whether your game is going to be successful or not, first you need your contract to work, right? And that it doesn't matter what the chain is. That's kind of consistently an issue that happens every day.
Got it. Yeah. And when projects come to you, like particularly in the Cardano space right now, I think there's this, we're still not at the point where there's like a massive launched project on Cardano. So there's still a lot of building being focused on and behind the scenes, and a lot of people are working to get things out there. What are some of the specific challenges or areas of focus for projects in the Cardano space? Because you're kind of intimately involved in their process. What are some of those challenges for them specifically in the Cardano space?
It's a good question. I think that a lot of the challenges are shared across chains. Specifically in Cardano, the key of it is that the architecture is different. You don't build contracts in the same way when you're in the Haskell environment, or specifically, I mean, not even just holding the tokens or kind of having those tokens in a safe place. I think that's like the bare bones, but actually using the token is a different story. So we've seen a lot of projects that are like, oh, cool, I minted my tokens, I've got a CNT, great. Okay, what are you going to do with them now? And so that's kind of when you start to kind of address questions of, okay, how are you using your Web3 integration? Does that exist? Yes, no. What wallet are you using? Are you more like Yoroi? We saw that was quite successful this week, with Sunday Swap and their testing, but obviously not a lot of people are doing that. And so I think that the bare bones, kind of everyone covers it, and we've all played around with that. Now that we're seeing new things come up with PAB, okay, cool, we can do more, but we still can't do an end-to-end process where it's like, okay, I've covered my integration. I've covered my Genesis safe, for example. There's no solution like that on Cardano yet. So you don't really know how to store your tokens securely. You don't know how to, like, for example, do multi-sig in the exact right way. We've tested it out through a contract as well, but only on testnet. And so there's a lot of small issues that kind of start to accumulate. And this isn't even addressing scalability, which is kind of the Hydra discussion and kind of how you make this work for thousands of users. And so I think that's ultimately the thing. It's not like there's a one huge issue, but it's just this accumulation of tiny little things that make the experience really hard. And for me, that's where the big challenge is. It's kind of like smoothing everything out. It's kind of like you build the foundations of a house. Now let's make sure that the windows look nice, that the floors are there, that we have a door, these small aspects that build up to become really important for the user.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point, which all kind of leads to a general theme, which is that it's really tough to build a launchpad that supports both the actual development of a project and the evangelization of that project. So getting people in front of other people that might want to invest, when the best practices for the target deployment chain are not established yet. And it's not to say, like, this isn't at all a cut on Cardano, because people know that watch my show, I am a fan of Cardano and believe in it long term. I think it's just, this is the place that Ethereum was in 5 years ago, where we have a lot of cool ideas, but there are going to be a lot of mistakes along the way, and there are no best practices. There aren't a bunch of primitives available for you to take and say, okay, I'm going to take this thing that works, improve it for my purposes, and move on. Yeah. People are building those now, like from scratch. So it takes time. And I think, I'm sure for you, Lucas, you're thinking about this from the event side as well. You want people to understand that. So the expectations are set appropriately when these projects launch. It might not be at the massive scale day one. It's here's the MVP.
And you brought a question I think you did ask, and I'm comfortable speaking about a few projects. You said, what specific projects are out there and kind of who are the references in the Cardano space. So we've got a lot of projects that we work for or work with, more accurately, more looking at mid to long-term commitments. So like, January, February, March of next year. Those are really interesting because they're working on their logic while the market is so hot. And it's like, don't you want to launch because the market is green, right? Everyone's interested. but you kind of have to hold back and say, actually, no, I really want to build something solid. And in the Cardano space, we've been used to doing that because all been here for, so many years, just kind of waiting and being patient. And I think that now there's this frustration because everyone wants to launch, like you said, but then you get a project like Meld that we're launching. And when something happens or when something goes wrong or whether it's a tiny delay, then people become frustrated and ultimately kind of lash out. And so it's really hard, even for us as I'd say as project builders, to keep motivated, right? And say, oh, wow, well, these guys seem to support us. Now they don't support us anymore. And so for us, kind of the solution there was building something that was hybrid, like the quick wins, which is launch projects now with a token and then migrate them. But you have to always find a balance, which is, are you building for Cardano or are you building here? And then eventually you'll build on Cardano. I think that that's an interesting discussion because a lot of the other kind of calls that we've had, I'd say with PR or with other community members, they're always like, are you a Polygon project? Are you an Ethereum project? Do you do BSC? Kind of where do you lie? They're trying to identify and kind of politicize it. And for us, we've obviously always been about Cardano. Like our resources, our development team is Cardano. And the Solidity side was kind of outsourced. But we kind of found that, we're lucky that at least we did that, right? Because now we're able to launch projects. If we had just waited for the Cardano aspect, then we probably wouldn't have the same community size and people would just, maybe not know us. I think that there's always this balance that you have to find. And going back to the question of projects, I think we're extremely excited to launch Meld, for example, one of, I'd say that the top projects that we do see in terms of resources and what they're building for Cardano. We're not saying it's the right or the wrong answer. What we're saying is we're contributing. And so are they, right? And that's kind of why we formalized a partnership with them and tried to build things together. The bridge between ADA and Matic is one of those things. Other aspects such as their wallet connection that they're working on is something that personally we would benefit highly from. So we see that there's a lot of synergies in the space. And so we really don't see how at this stage anyone should be talking about competition.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think it's so early. And in the Cardano space, I think because people have very deeply rooted convictions about how Cardano has been designed and what the core values are and all that sort of thing. And because they've done this in a more mature crypto ecosystem, like back when Ethereum was kind of coming up, it was the only example of this smart contract enabled blockchain where you can build dApps and you can do all these things. So it's just a different environment. Well, that's what I love about the community in Cardano. But I think everyone should just kind of think about this as even the things that don't go well or the things that prove to be the wrong approach are good for Cardano, like good for the ecosystem, because that's how you build best practices. And we're not going to do that unless people are allowed to build and experiment and make mistakes, double back and retry something else. So I applaud that approach because that's the builder in me that wants things to be lessons learned, I guess.
The question is, how do you navigate that risk as well? Because, so for example, I don't know, like a company that is fully tokenized or that only relies on their token as a way of kind of keeping the lights on, obviously they're highly dependent on the price of their token. And so a Launchpad specifically, I can talk about our utility of the token. The more launches you do, the better your token does, because people need to hold your token to be able to stake and to be able to get into the launches. So that's a clear incentive. Is the incentive or the KPI is launch. And obviously how well those launches do. At the same time, you're trying to build technology and that takes time. So if you think about it this way, we put in long hours, but let's say we have 15 days an hour or 15 hours a day. I can't even speak now. After like 15 hours of work, you kind of look back and you're like, okay, how many hours did I spend planning? How many hours did I spend planning the next launch? And then how many hours did I actually spend building technology or thinking about how to build the technology in a better way? And ultimately, this is what you need to scale across your team. And what happens is you look back and we were looking at it now. I think we hit our 6-month milestone the other day. We're like, oh, wow. We've obviously great. We've hit like 20,000 registered users, 100,000 community members. If we've been in business for 6 months, but then you look back and it's like, how much actually did we build? And it's great because we have, we're somewhere, which is like you said, we haven't, stayed at the same place, but we'd obviously be a lot happier if we've done more. And how you do more is probably with more resources in Haskell. So we've got a lot of people getting trained to understand Plutus and, be able to kind of contribute more. But at the same time, it's very frustrating. And it's frustrating for us. It's frustrating for Meld. It's frustrating for a lot of other Cardano projects that we work with, because they share the same frustrations, right? And so I think that what we need to work on collectively as the Cardano space is potentially, okay, is there a best way to, I don't know, share best practices across the space, not within groups or not within launchpads, but literally across the space. And people, or channels or Discord groups. I mean, there's just so many ways of doing it. And I feel like we're not using that to its fullest of its potential, because we're all kind of doing our own thing. And we could obviously be collaborating a lot more. So that's kind of my only, I'd say, regret or wish is that we would work together more. But yeah, again, we're very happy as to where we are, and we're happy that we're able to kind of get these strong partnerships with partners that we do have.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that thought as well. The collaboration and the fact that really effectively everything that's built in this space when it goes live will be open source, more or less. So I think people should treat it that way. More so, like that's the foundation upon what Cardano and most other protocols have been built, is open source components that you and I can verify, and you and I know exactly how they work. And that's the thing. Building communities around your product are really what makes it effective. So for Vent specifically, this is an interesting question. Obviously totally understand, and I was very happy. Part of what appealed to me about Vent is the fact that there is an EVM element. There's the Polygon world, which can bridge liquidity from the Ethereum space at large, and Cardano, a focus on multi-chain, because that's the future. What's the path forward for you from your perspective about where Vent goes in maybe the first quarter of 2022? Like, what are some of the milestones or things that you're looking for as KPIs for Vent?
So I think there's two aspects. One is in terms of usability and adoption, and the other one is about inherent tech or tech stack. The first is obviously we want to kind of get comfortable with the tech stack that we have, and kind of learn from what we've seen in the past 3 months. So we kind of brand ourselves, or kind of identify ourselves as what they call CDeFi. So we've got a DeFi component, which is really strong, which is great. But we've got a somewhat considerable centralized part of it as well. A lot of projects are kind of, no, we're fully decentralized. That isn't real in today's business. If you want to do something, it's very, very hard to be fully decentralized, because KYC is one of the issues that always consistently comes up, or any type of compliance. If you want to run a business where there's transparency, obviously my face is here. Our company exists. It's registered. We're in the EU. We comply with EU regulations. We comply with SEC regulations. And all of that means you need to run centralized logs of specific things, not of transactions, but definitely of like kind of the users that you have. And so what that means in terms of our tech stack and our goals specifically for next year is to standardize that as much as possible, to make the experience easy, because right now it's a hassle for us and for users, because we need to kind of bridge these two worlds. So we've got wallets on one side and usernames on the other, and then we kind of manually do this connection between the two worlds. And so that, like, kind of mastering that aspect and being like, okay, this is flawless. The KYC is the fastest it can be. We're using the best provider out there. I don't know, in terms of, for example, support, we've got the best support out there, and we can support MetaMask users, and we can support Yoroi users, and we can help them do that really efficiently. Again, it's kind of polishing those details. I think that's our objective from now to December. From December onwards, fortunately, if everything goes well, touch wood, we release version 1 of the Launchpad. So right now we're running an MVP, and it works. But obviously there's still a lot of kind of bugs and stuff that needs to be addressed. If in January we're able to get that kind of version out there and working with a new UI, properly built things from our end, that will be a huge change for the user experience. And what that allows us to do is, okay, the users are kind of happy. We've addressed a lot of their concerns. Now we can start to look inside and work on our backend stuff, and change, for example, how are we calling the Web3? How efficient is that? So we're spending quite a lot of money on, for example, Web3 calls, when you're signing with the wallet. Every single time you're retrieving the funds, or you're sending the funds, or you're connecting, you're signing, all that costs a lot of money. So you can use the MetaMask I think it's an open source connection you can do, but sometimes it's a bit laggy. And so then you have to go and refer to kind of like Alchemy or other tools that are out there that cost considerable more. And so that's where I think there's a lot of optimization to do. We've tested it out. It's great, but it's not super scalable. And we're all about scalability, right? And so those are the objectives for us there. The second is in January, we're supposed to have our first Haskell crowd sale built, tested to do like an internal version. For us, the only question is, when are we ready to take the risk to do that with real funds for a real project? Because we're ready to put a bit of funds from our side on the line, but we're not ready to kind of put, $250,000 from our users on the line. Because I think that obviously that's their money and they trust that, there's a responsibility behind it. And so at that point, maybe I don't know how the community would react, but kind of running like a fake IDO would be pretty cool. Like, okay, let's just test it out. Kind of let's get everyone registered and whitelisted. And we'll send out some tokens beforehand, just that people have it in their Yoroi wallets. Okay, what is the experience like? And so, they're not actually making anything in terms of real money, but they're actually participating in testing a tool with thousands of users. I think that would be an amazing milestone. And if we're able to do that, between Q1 and Q2 of next year, that would be a really big aspect for us that we're happy with.
That would be sweet. I think that people would be all over it. And like, I talk about this all the time, but like a lot of projects think, okay, well, we got to get to mainnet as fast as possible, because our users want it. And I agree with that. I think a lot of users they want to use the project they're excited about. That makes sense. That's human nature. I think though that projects underestimate how much users appreciate even testnet stuff. Like, I think it would be sweet if Event tried to do, to test this Haskell crowd sale in testnet, but made it like a very lightly incentivized testnet. Hey, if you're going to participate here so we can test this, we have all your addresses and we'll credit, a small, reward for these users who help us test this so that we are sure that it's going to work properly in mainnet. It builds trust. People, even with very minimal incentives, will give you a ton of really good data. So like more projects should do that, in my opinion, is like just rock in testnet and make sure everything works nicely.
The issue is also how do you gather those insights? So for example, we were missing a lot of analytics tools. So they exist now, like on EVMs. So you can actually like kind of consult and download and get a lot of reports and then build dashboards. We still haven't been able to do that like at scale, even on testnet. But that's something that's, will come, right? So that's why I think it's, again, game of patience, right? Let's just wait it out and see what happens. So going back to projects, what will also be really excited is to see how other people are building. Speaking in terms of like open source and what people are pushing out there, we haven't seen a lot of Haskell code, and we haven't seen any, I would say, big auditor that says, here are the best, best crowd sales that I've seen, or here are the best contracts that I've seen for DEXs. So we're really excited to see kind of what, for example, what SundaySwap comes up with, and how that works. I think that they wanted to push something out by end of November as well. So, we're following the game pretty closely. And now I think that it's a bit like chess as well. If we're trying to always use these metaphors, it's, who moves their parts of the game and kind of how you're part of that. We're obviously trying to scale up our team. I think we just hit 20 people in the team. So that was nice. But we're still kind of missing more people. Specifically, I would say like this mid to senior level Haskell dev, right? You obviously can't be paying like 150K in salaries to everyone. And we didn't raise that much money, unfortunately. So we have to be efficient, but at the same time, you need more brains on this. Like, this is hard. And so as you try to build, you have to find that balance between architecture and actually building those contracts. And so if we want to kind of dive like very briefly into the ins and out of a crowd sale, you have to put in the funds. So there's this like kind of fund manager that is a key aspect of the crowd sale, where you've got a series of functions like starting a crowd sale, withdrawing funds, putting in the tokens, what happens with those divisions of the tokens and how you allocate them. But then you've also got the whole aspect of how are you managing the tokenomics, which is the groups within the crowd sale, right? Is there like a public sale, a private sale? There's a lot of these I'd say the intricacies of running a token sale, not just a public one, but a token sale in general that can be automated and encapsulated into a contract. And that's what we're trying to do. Instead of having like different parts of the puzzle, we want to kind of build a one-stop shop that projects come to and they're like, I'm building this game. There's no questions asked. I just go to this, platform called VentUp, and it's going to run me through the steps. Step A is, okay, what are your tokenomics? And we'll just ask you on a browser, simple interface. Yes, this is how much I want to raise. This is how I'm going to do it, blah, blah, blah. Next step. Okay, I've built a template crowd sale for you. Do you want to review your code and download the code? And kind of that mentality of even being able to take that crowd sale well and then deploy it with someone else. We're fine with that. We just need to make sure that we have a business model that helps us keep the lights up. So that's kind of where we're still working on finding that product market fit. But we clearly have a product and we clearly have an idea of what the solution is going to look like. And now the idea is just, test and prototype what we have and kind of improve on that.
Yeah, it's all in the execution for sure. And, that being said, for folks that are watching this that, want to keep a closer eye on what you're up to and follow the latest updates, like what are the best places for folks to get engaged?
So I'd say obviously our Telegram group is going to be the best place to kind of talk to us. So that's just t.me/ventfinance. At the same time, our Twitter is something that's quite active. So you can also find us on all socials at ventfinance. And if not, I think there's a link. It's vent.ec/links. And then, that pretty much is a list of all of our links for socials, etc. So happy to kind of put that in the bio and go follow that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the YouTuber's secret weapon, the description box. You can toss all sorts of things in there. Say, hey, go check that out. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And we're always open to feedback as well. So I think that's, you ask is like, what's the best place to read? Reading is great, but unfortunately, there's so many hours or kind of minutes to kind of text stuff. What we really like is conversation. So we tried to spend approximately, I think 30 to an hour every day, probably like in the late evenings and early mornings to read what people say. And that's the best way. Just, Telegram us, DM us, put out a tweet or something. We'll probably see it. We'll get people to look for it.
Excellent. Yeah. So if you have questions, it's an open invitation. Feel free to ask them. Same in the comments below. If you want to leave a comment here, I'll share them with Lucas and the team. But Lucas, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today and share. This is probably the first of many videos we'll do. We'll keep everyone abreast of what's going on in the event world.
Exactly. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Thanks to everyone who's watching. Hope you and your family have a great week ahead. And until next time, cheers. Awesome, dude.
Yeah, that went pretty well.